Welcome to Pattern and Craft. I'm Courtney, and in today's video I wanted to review some yarn with you. So over the past few months I've been ordering different yarns and trying them out, and I wanted to kind of review them all. I got more than I can do in one video, so I think it would be good to go by fiber content. And so today we're going to be looking at all the yarns that I've tried that have bamboo in them. Bamboo is a very soft and kind of shiny fiber, and it's a plant-based. Obviously it's made out of bamboo, and often it is described as viscose or rayon from bamboo. I'm not sure if there's other forms of it, and it is similar to cotton in a way. It is plant-based. It does not have any stretch, or it's just very taut. It doesn't have that springiness that wool will have, or even acrylic, where you can kind of stretch it and it will return to its same shape. It's just very stiff, but it is also very soft. It is has a nice hand to it. It's softer than cotton in most instances, and then it has this beautiful sheen to it. So this is Truboo. I thought we would review this yarn first because it is the only one that I picked up that is 100% bamboo. So it is 100% rayon from bamboo. It's called Truboo, and it is a Lion brand yarn. It's a category 3 light yarn, so it's around a DK weight. And this one you get 220 meters or 241 yards per 100 grams, and the balls come in 100 grams. And they recommend a 4mm hook. So I actually have about 10 yarns to review, and I wanted to kind of just compare the hook size recommended to the hook size that I ended up liking, go over the pros and cons of the yarn, whether I liked the yarn or not, and any other information that might seem pertinent. So, I mean, first off, it's a really pretty yarn. You can see it's a low twist though, and it has many strands, but in a low twist form. It seems like there's a couple like this, and I'll show you the comparative ones from other brands. So I'm going to be using this same 5-round solid, mostly solid granny square. I do the 4th round with a little bit of a open weave there, but then go back to it being solid for the final round. I actually will provide the pattern for this, actually the pattern chart for this, so feel free to take a screenshot of it if you want to test your own yarns with the same square. Obviously you could use any type of square, or even just going back and forth in rows if you want to test yarn as well. And of course it'll change for depending on the stitch that you're using as well. This is all double crochet. As I said, recommends a number 4 hook, but I thought that looked a little stiff to me, and like I could go up. So that was with the number 4 hook. I found that I liked going up to a 4.5 or a 5 on this one. The 5 starts to get a little loose, but it's pretty. If only there was a 4.25 hook. Maybe there are, but I only have a set that goes in half sizes. So I find the drape is much nicer when you go up to a 5 or a 4.5. I am a tight crocheter though, so a 4 might be just fine for someone who just naturally crochets a little looser. I tend to crochet quite tightly, so it makes sense that I would like it with a larger hook size. So pros of this yarn are it's very soft. It has like a silky soft hand to it. It's really quite beautiful. There's a lot of sheen to it. So if you like shiny yarn, you would like this, but if you don't like shiny yarn, maybe don't. It's a little bit, we can talk about the cons also. So the cons are you see every single mistake that you make. You can see I went a little too tight right here with where I joined the round, and it looks very obvious. It's very splitty, and that has to do with the way it's constructed, being so low twist and having multiple strands, very thin strands. It gives it a nice soft feel, but it also gives it that splitty effect, and then you can kind of see the strands when you have your final stitched up work. It's kind of I don't know, it's a certain look. So if you like that, great. If you aren't into it, maybe don't go for this yarn, but I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence. Like I really liked working with it, but at the same time, it's not for beginners, I would say. It's very slippery, it's very splitty, it's, I don't know, it shows a lot of mistakes. So maybe use it if you're a little more advanced and you want to try a 100% bamboo yarn. The other thing I would say is it's a little bit thin. I mean, that's probably, they designed it for clothing, so that makes sense if you wanted a thinner yarn for knitting or crochet. I only do crochet and I don't do a lot of garments. I tend to do more blankets and usable items around the home, like pillows. I don't know, in the future I might do garments. So for me, it's a little thin because it would take, you know, a lot of crocheting to get a larger item like a blanket. So at the 4, I wanted to show the sizing. So for the 4mm hook, we have just over 3¼ inch across on our square. For the 4.5, we have 3.5 inches for the 5 round square, and for the 5mm, we have just shy of 3¾ across for our square, for our test square. So that kind of gives you a sense of how big the items you can make with this are. All right, let's move on to something that looks similar to this yarn and is from a different brand. So this one's called Soft Bamboo Double Go Handmade. This one's from Hobbii. It is says a super soft blend of bamboo cotton with a little acrylic. And here's the stats. It's 70% bamboo, 23% cotton, and 7% acrylic. The balls come in 50 gram size, so half the amount of the previous Truboo. And you get 115 meters for that weight of yarn. So comparatively, they're pretty similar. So if you doubled this to be 100 grams, you would get 230 meters out of it, whereas this is 220 meters. So this is technically a little heavier of a yarn than this one. I think this one is also considered a sport weight on the website. So that makes sense. This would be like a number 2 yarn, whereas this is a number 3, but they're so close. Those yarn categories aren't perfect, you know? So let's look at the squares on this one. So I went with the same size squares as previous, so we can kind of compare. I have a 4, a 4.5, and a 5mm hook. So you can see the Truboo and the Soft Bamboo Double with acrylic from Hobbii are very similar in size. So I would say they're almost interchangeable, and they're very similar in look. It's a little bit maybe less drapey. So this is a little more floppy in the number 5, whereas this is a little more stiff, and it has the same sheen, maybe just a little less, but pretty comparative. And it has a similar construction as far as the yarn being low twist with the thin, like lots of, let's see how many plies it is. So this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plies. And then the Truboo is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're both 8 ply. So, but it's kind of funny that they look so similar worked up into crochet when one is 100% bamboo while the other one is, well, I guess 70% bamboo is a pretty high content. So 70% bamboo, and then you get a little cotton and acrylic in there. So that probably just makes it behave a little bit more. Although I have in my notes that it was quite difficult to work with, very slippery, very splitty. And it also has like a coating on it. A lot of yarns have this, I've noticed, where there's something added to the yarn that makes it feels kind of like, I don't know, slick on your skin. After you're working with it for a little while, you feel like this residue. I'm not sure if that's intentionally added to the yarn or if that's something that helps them with, you know, winding the yarn and going through the machinery of making it. But I did notice it had that, and it kind of irritated my airways. I'm very sensitive, though. I have a condition similar to asthma. So I noticed when I was working with this, I was getting a little bit of a reaction, so I'd probably want to wear a face mask. But other than that, it was very similar to Truboo. Also for the sizes, in case you were interested, it is really similar to the Truboo. We have 3 1/4 for the 4mm. We have 3 1/2 for the 4 1/2mm, and we have just shy of 3 3/4 for the 5mm hook. So next I wanted to show one that is very similar to the last two. This one is Tencel Bamboo Double Go Handmade from Hobbii as well. So sort of a companion to this one that you could easily get confused. The labels are very similar, but this one has Tencel. So it is 40% Tencel and 60% bamboo. So that one is also on their site, I believe, considered a sport weight. I did find it to be a little lighter than the soft bamboo double, but really, it's really subtle. So this one I did try in a 4 1/2, and a 5mm. And if we compare, they're all pretty much the same. So these three I feel like you could use interchangeably, which is kind of a good thing, because if you want to have a broader color selection, then you could use any of these 3 yarns together, the Truboo, or the 2 Hobbii ones, the Go Handmade Soft Bamboo and the Go Handmade Tencel Bamboo. So yeah, these are all very similar. The same issues came up for me with this one as far as it being that low twist yarn. It's kind of hard to work with, it's kind of slippery, but in my notes it does say I liked it better. I think also it didn't have that residue, or at least not as much, because I didn't notice any issues working with it, so maybe they didn't add as much or any of that. I don't know if it's sizing or softener or what it is, but I didn't notice it working with this. But yes, it is very slippery, it is very splitty, and it does show mistakes when you work with it. So probably not a great one for beginners, but it is really beautiful, has that same sheen to it, very soft, very nice hand feel. So sort of, I think if I was to work with any of them again, it would probably be Truboo or the Bamboo Tencel. I liked those both a lot. Okay, the next yarn I want to show is very similar construction again, but it is a heavier weight. So we do have the low twist, many thin strands type of yarn. It is quite soft, but it is thicker. So as far as comparing size, I started with a 4mm hook and went up to a 5, but you can see that the square is bigger. So that's a 4mm hook. You can see it's larger than with the other yarns that I've shown so far. And then I went up to a 5 for the next try, and I liked that quite a bit. So these are the two compared, both using a 5mm hook. So you can see you get a bigger square with the same amount of stitches and the same hook size. So it is a larger yarn, or a heavier yarn. in it, but it also still kind of has that sheen to it. It does have less. It's not quite as shiny as the Truboo or the Hobbii yarns. This is, sorry, I forgot to show it. This is Yarn B, Bamboo-tiful. The color is linen. It doesn't have linen content. That's a little confusing. But the content is 50% cotton and 50% viscose from bamboo. They suggest a 4mm hook. I do not agree. For my style of crochet, the 5 was much better. As far as working with it, I did enjoy working with it a little better. I feel like it does still show mistakes and it still has kind of a mind of its own, and it is still a little splitty. But I don't know, maybe because it's a slightly thicker weight yarn, I preferred it. And also it wasn't as slippery as the others. Maybe because it is less shiny, has a little bit more cotton, it wasn't so slippery to work with as the other 3 that I've mentioned. And so I like this yarn. I would probably use it again, but it does kind of get that same thready look in the stitches from the way the yarn is constructed. I forgot to mention the stats on this. So this one is 113 grams per ball, and you get 257 or 235 meters from that ball. The 4mm hook on Bamboo-tiful, we have 3 and in between 3.5 and 3.75 inch. And for the 5mm hook, we have just over 4 inches for our 5mm hook. So that's the sizing for the Bamboo-tiful. All right, next let's look at Coboo, because that yarn is the last one I have of the yarns that I tested that is a similar construction as the ones that I've been showing. It's wound as a cake though, instead of as a bullet skein, which I did like. It's easier to pull from the center. That's about the only thing I liked about it, unfortunately. So Coboo is actually I have one more to show you after this. It's similar to Coboo. This one's very thready when you work it up. That low twist, thin ply thing is very noticeable in Coboo. So this is a Lion Brand yarn that's pretty well known. Again, this is one that I've heard about a lot. This one's 100 grams per ball. You get 232 yards or 212 meters. 51% cotton, 49% rayon from bamboo. They recommend a 4mm hook. It's a category 3 lightweight yarn or DK yarn. And I did start with a 4mm hook. I didn't agree that that was working for me. So I did a 4.5 and a 5, and I actually did 2 5s. I did one with looser tension and one with tighter tension. So I think a 5mm hook was my favorite for the Coboo, maybe a 4.5. It looks a little bit more under control in the 4.5, but I liked the drape that you get with the 5mm hook. But it's definitely more cottony than the others that I've shown so far. So in this one, it does have a lower bamboo content, and it's about equally, it's almost 50-50 bamboo and cotton. So it makes sense that it's less shiny, less soft, less slippery. So it is nice that it's less slippery. That makes it easier to work with, but you do lose out on that shiny, super soft feel. It's still quite a nice yarn, but I can't get over this really thready look it looks like when you crochet it up. I don't know if you can tell what I'm talking about, but you really see the plies of the yarn, you know? So I'm not a huge fan. So for Coboo, the 4mm hook, we have 3 3/4 inch square. For the 4.5mm hook, we have 4 1/8. For the 5mm hook, we are getting 4.25 inches across for our test square. And for the square that was 5mm crochet hook, but with a looser tension used, I got almost 4.5 inches across. So that's the stats for the Coboo. Now I want to show you one that is very similar to Coboo, and it is also made by a Lion brand, but it's almost like they fixed it somehow. Like all the issues that I had with Coboo, I didn't have with this one. So this is a LB collection yarn by Lion brand, and something about Lion brand, they do these nicer yarns in the LB collection, but I'm not sure that they do them for permanent release. I think they're kind of limited edition. Correct me if I'm wrong. And they are really nice. Like I've tried a lot of their LB collection yarns and liked them, but I get a little nervous that I won't be able to always get a hold of them. But you can use this one pretty much interchangeably with Coboo. But the big problem with this one is, I mean, it's a bullet skein. I would prefer it was a cake, but that's no big deal. What I didn't like is the color selection is very limited. I don't know if they're going to come up with new colors for the future, but right now I think there's only like 6 colors, and they're all very bright except for this one, and I tend to like neutral colors, so this is the only neutral color available. There's no white, if I'm correct. It's just like some brights and this kind of neutral color, and that's it, and it's very limited. Unfortunately, I really liked this yarn, so I wish there was more colors. And it really worked out beautifully. I think it does actually recommend the right hook size on the label for once. So it does recommend a 5mm hook, and the content is 52% cotton, 48% rayon from bamboo. It's super similar to Coboo. Let me see about the... Here we get 100 grams for both of these, and this one's 215 meters while this is 212. That's essentially the same weight, you know? So it could be used interchangeably. For some reason, it was so much easier to work with. It didn't show all my mistakes so much as the Coboo did. It's still thready, but for some reason it doesn't bother me. It like the threads lay together better than on the Coboo. Here they almost look kind of tangly, and here they don't. They just look really behaved. So I'm not sure. It's almost like they made the same yarn, but they somehow fixed it. But then they didn't offer it in very many colors, so I'm kind of sad. I would like to see this in more colors, and I would prefer it to Coboo. But Coboo is the one they have with a bunch of colors and really pretty ones. So I'm conflicted here. So I only made one test square of this one because it seemed like a really good fit as far as the 5mm hook that they recommended. And that's measuring 4.25 inches across for me. So yeah, I was a fan of that one. Cotton Bamboo, Lion Brand collection, LB collection by Lion Brand. But I need more colors. Oh, I did want to mention this still has a bit of splittiness due to the low twist, but I wasn't running into issues that much compared to working with Coboo. Like Coboo you start working with and you're immediately noticing how splitty it is and how challenging it is to work with. But for some reason this one, it has a splittiness to it, but it wasn't bothering me. It wasn't at the forefront of my mind while I was working with it. Okay, let's move on. Okay, next I want to talk about these 3 yarns, and I wanted to mention I'm not 100% sure these are actually different yarns or all the same yarn offered by different brands, because they have the same content and work up pretty much the same as each other. So yeah, I just actually compared the labels and they're all 100 grams, all 250 meters. So that's really, really close. So as far as the yarn goes, I think I'm gonna just review all three of these together since I have the same exact notes for all three. So what I was finding is that they are very soft. They're not shiny. So you're not getting that shiny bamboo effect, but you do have, you know, a higher cotton content than the other yarns that we started with. But I do really like the softness. It's a little bit, because of the different construction of the yarn itself, it's almost string-like. So it's a little bit dense. Again, there's no stretch to it. It's just it's almost string-like. So it's not quite as yarny as I'd want it to be. I don't know a better describer. As far as working with it, it feels kind of hard. It feels unforgiving. But I do like the final result. It's a good look. It has nice stitch definition. Oh, that's a different square that I was playing with, but it has good stitch definition. It doesn't show your mistakes so much the way the other yarns that I showed so far do. It's a lot more forgiving as far as using the yarn, and it has this nice soft finish to it. It doesn't feel string-like once it's crocheted up. It's just while you're working with it, I don't know, it's just kind of dense and it feels not so nice, but once you have it made into your square, it's a nice final effect. Like I would definitely use these again for sure. I really like them, and I like that as opposed to the, you know, Coboo and the Truboo and those other ones with the low twist, high ply. These, I don't know, they just kind of look, they don't show all your mistakes. They're more forgiving. It's nice. It's a nice yarn, even though it's a little string-like and a little weird to work with, but it doesn't split so much the way those others do either. So I liked that about it. It's a lot easier to work with. The only difference between these three that I noticed is I did notice when I was working with the Premier, it did seem to have that kind of coating again, something on it that makes it feel kind of like you just put lotion on your hands. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it feels like that has more than either of these does. So it did kind of irritate me with my asthma-like condition. So I liked all of these. They probably have a little bit of a difference in price, but I think you can use them all interchangeably, which is nice. If you want to have more color options, you could definitely combine these. And I think my favorite working with was maybe the Rainbow Bamboo, maybe the Stylecraft Naturals Bamboo Cotton. I don't know. It was a toss-up between these two. I did like working with the Bamboo Fair. It had that bit of sizing or whatever it is on there. If you know what that is, could you comment below on my video just so I can know what it is that I'm referring to, if you know what it is I'm talking about. Okay, let's show the squares now, and I'll show them all in comparison. So the only difference was this one, the Bamboo plus Cotton Stylecraft Naturals, did recommend a 3.5 millimeter hook. So I did start with a 3.5 millimeter on that one, but I felt like that was very tight. That's very stiff. I don't think that's a good hook size for me. I am a tight crocheter, as I've said, so it still looks good. It's real tight, you know. It doesn't ripple a bunch or anything, but it just doesn't have enough drape for me. So then I went up to a 4 millimeter crochet hook, and that was better. I think that's fine if you didn't consider future washing and shrinking. And then I went up to a 4.5mm crochet hook, and I liked that better. It does start to kind of look a little too open and show mistakes more. But again, after washing, that'll tighten up and maybe kind of give you this effect in the end. So that's those. And then for the other two, I started with a 4mm hook and went up to a 4.5. I think I tried a 5 with this one and it was just too loose. I didn't even finish the square. And then and that one's the rainbow from Hobbii. Or is it Hobbii? And then the Bamboo Fair. Again, I did a 4mm hook for this one and a 4.5mm hook for the larger square. They all have sort of a similar feel to them. This one's maybe a little bit more drapey just because maybe I had a bit looser tension. I'm not sure if it's the yarn itself. It does feel a little softer than the others. Maybe the rainbow one is slightly softer than the Stylecraft Naturals or Bamboo Fair. It's very slight difference though. It might even just be the color. Sometimes between colors you get a slightly different hand feel. So that one I have in the 4.5mm and the 4. And then I did the same thing for the Bamboo Fair. I did a 4.5 a 4 and a 4.5 because that was what was recommended. And you can see the squares are pretty similar in size. All of them kind of are similar, but not exact, but I feel like the differences are more to do with my own tension differences from having made the squares at different times, but we can still do measurements. The 4mm, I have 3.5 on the rainbow. I have just over between 3.5 and 3/4 on the Bamboo Fair. And I have just shy of 3.5 on the Stylecraft Naturals Bamboo Cotton for the 4mm hooks. And then for the 4.5mm hooks, I have 3 3/4 for rainbow, 3 3/4 or maybe just a little bit over for Bamboo Fair. And I have just under 3 3/4 for Stylecraft Naturals Bamboo plus Cotton. So pretty similar, and I liked all of them and I would use them again. And then lastly, I have 2 yarns that are kind of different from all the ones I showed. So here's Bamboo Pop. I really love this yarn. I'm not sure why, I just really like it, but I wish it was thicker is my only issue. So this is a 50% cotton, 50% bamboo, and it's by Universal Yarn. And let's look at the stats. So this one is 100 grams for 292 yards or 266 meters. And it's a number 3 light. I would almost call this a 2. Or just, yeah, a light 3, which is light DK. And then they recommend a 4mm hook. So if you look closely, I like this yarn a lot because some of the plies are more of a dull sheen and some of them are more of a shiny. So it almost gives this almost like there's a lurex in there, but there's not. And then on the darker colors, it gives it sort of a heathered effect because you have some that are picking up the dye more in a red kind of, this is the color Penny. So it's more like a russet red, and then it has these little flecks of a lighter kind of like clay color. So I don't know if they're like winding together cotton with bamboo as separate strands rather than blending the fibers and then spinning them. But I like that effect a lot. I don't know, it just looks really cool. And here we do have a higher twist than, say, the Truboo or Coboo or any of those. So we get less splitting issues but we also have, instead of it being a 4-ply, that is a tight twist where you can really see the different plies, like we did with the rainbow bamboo, bamboo fair, and bamboo plus cotton. So that kind of has that like string-like quality because it's 4 plies with a tight twist, whereas this is a tighter twist, but I feel like it's more than 4 plies. You look. Yeah, this is 6-ply, so it's kind of in between the others. The other one the first ones we had were 8-ply. The ones we just looked at were 4-ply, whereas this is 6-ply. But I wish it was a little thicker because I want to use it for blankets and things. I want to use it for stuff, but it's pretty thin. So I do have some squares that I worked up. So I have that in a 4mm hook as recommended, and then I felt like that was a little too stiff, so I went up to a 4.5, and I really like that. So as far as the sizing on that goes, I have just over 3.5 inches, like 3 5/8 or something, on the 4mm. And then I have just over 3 3/4, almost 4 inches on the 4.5mm hook. It is quite beautiful. It has a sheen to it. It is a little splitty to work with. It does kind of have that strandy, kind of tangly look. I don't know why I like this better why I'm more attracted to this than like the Coboo and the Truboo and the Hobbii versions, the Go Handmade. I don't know why I like it. Maybe it's just that shiny flecks that I like in there. It also doesn't show as much mistakes as the other ones. Let me get them. So as you can see, it doesn't really show how, mistakes as much as the Truboo does. It still shows them, but in a little bit more forgiving of a way. But I just kind of wish it was the thickness of this one, which is the Yarn Bee Bamboo-tiful. Like I wish I could blend these two together, like make this one this weight. That's the only thing. I wish it was a little thicker. But it is a beautiful yarn. I don't know, something about it. And it doesn't have any of that coating stuff on it, so I can use it without any issues. And I like the color offerings. If you go look at the colors they have, the color selection's really nice. So I think this is definitely one I'll use again. I just don't know for what, because I feel like it's a little too thin for blankets, but it's really beautiful and I really like it. So we'll see. I don't know. It's similar in size, I guess, to Truboo. Let's grab those again. So remember, Truboo and then the 2 Hobbii yarns were pretty much the same. Actually, you know what? It's a little bigger than the Truboo, so it's still giving me more bang for my buck as far as when I crochet with it. I'm still gonna get a bigger square for the same hook size. So it is nice that it's a little heavier than my Truboo and the other 2 Hobbii yarns, the soft bamboo Tencel and the other one. So I guess as far as the kind of splittier, threadier ones, I like this, that you get more size for the yarn. So I guess I like that it does give you a little bit of a bigger square, and it does give you, it is a little bit more behaved than these other shiny yarns. It's not as soft though. It does feel a little bit more cottony. It's not as silky, but it's really pretty. So I don't know, I just really like it. So not sure why, but I will be buying more of this Bamboo Pop by Universal Yarn. Okay, we're almost done. The very last yarn I have is Uptown Bamboo DK. This is from Universal Yarn as well. So this one is a pretty high acrylic content. This is 80% anti-pilling acrylic and 20% bamboo. And I want to like it, but I have this thing. I don't like the feeling of acrylic when I'm crocheting with it. I don't like the way it feels on my hands. I don't like the way it, oh, I don't know. It's just something weird about it, which is too bad because I kind of have issues with animal fibers as well, and acrylic is the closest thing you can get in behavior to wool. So it's a little unfortunate. I can't use wool and I don't like using acrylic. So that sucks. But I mean, as far as all the yarns we've reviewed, this one's the most well behaved, I'd say. Like, okay. And it's the largest, so you can, you know, it's like more like a traditional worsted weight yarn, I believe. It says DK, but I swear it seems like a worsted weight to me. Maybe a light worsted, maybe a heavy DK. So I'm getting some pretty big squares from this one. So let's look at my notes. So yeah, this one, let's look at the stats. We've got 100 grams, which gives us 260 meters. And they recommend a 5mm crochet hook, which is what I did for my first square. So my first square was fine. It's definitely fine. It's a okay recommendation, but it felt a little stiff, a little tight because I'm a tight crocheter. So then I went up to a 5.5mm crochet hook, and that's much better. I like that a lot. It's definitely got that acrylic hand to it. It's not drapey like the other bamboo yarns that I've shown today, but it does have a different quality having that 20% of bamboo added to the acrylic. So I would say if you like acrylic yarn, you might like this better than other acrylic yarn because it is soft and it's anti-pilling. So I mean, it's got some good, you know, qualities other than being softer with the bamboo in there. So it is a good yarn. I like the final result. I don't like working with it. I want my crochet experience to be enjoyable, and with something with this high of acrylic content, I feel like anything with over 50% acrylic, I start to not like it at all. So yeah, with 80% acrylic, this yarn isn't for me, but it could be for other people who don't mind acrylic, and it isn't scratchy. It isn't bad for acrylic. It's just, I don't know. I had just sensory issues with it, I guess. I don't know. And then here it is with the 6mm hook. It starts to get a little loose. That's probably going up a little too high in hook size. It starts to get more drapey though. It starts to get more loose and pliable, but it also starts to kind of get uneven and show mistakes. So I would say if your crochet style is anywhere similar to mine, you would want to use a 5.5mm hook. And let's go ahead and do the measurements on these. So for the 5mm hook, I'm getting 4 1/4 on my test square. On the 5.5mm hook, I'm getting 4 1/4. Wait, what was this one? 4 1/4. Oh, just over 4 1/4. And then for the 6mm hook, I'm getting 4 3/4. So I feel like that was maybe, oh yeah, here, 4 1/2. I guess my square is not super square. So 4 1/2 here, 4 1/4 here, and 4 3/4 here for the 6mm. So I would go with this. I don't know. I think adding the bamboo in there was a good move. I think they have the Uptown anti-pilling acrylic all by itself as a yarn, and I feel like I've tried it and didn't like it. But adding the bamboo in it, I liked it a lot better. It definitely it added something nice to it. It definitely improves the yarn, adding the bamboo in there. It gives it a nice softness, like more natural sheen. But yeah, I can't hang with something with this high of acrylic content. So it's a no for me, but it is a nice yarn. So in review, if I had to choose, I think these would be my favorites. Truboo was a close one though. I don't know. Maybe Truboo should be in here too. Maybe Truboo can get an honorable mention. So yeah, I feel like these are the ones I will return to and use again in the future if I'm craving to do some project that bamboo lends itself to. Yeah, I definitely liked this one. These were good, like everyday, like kind of like a step up from everyday cotton type yarns, like because they're a little more drapey, because they're a little softer. There's just something a little bit nice about these, and they still kind of have that like cotton yarn look while being, I don't know, just a little more elevated, being with that bamboo in there. And then, yeah, I loved the bamboo pop, the way it has the little flecks of shine in there without being the whole yarn being shiny. It's just little like hints. I liked that. The Truboo does have its merits, you know, being very, very soft, very shiny, but it's also really, really hard to work with and very splitty and shows all your mistakes. But I mean, it has a really beautiful feel and a nice sheen. So I guess it can have its place here in my favorites. I want this in more colors. Lion Brand, replace Coboo with this and give me more colors, please. It's just a little bit better. And I don't know, I'm not sure why I like it more, but I do, so please. And then a close second would be this one. I just, I would like it if it was as thick as this yarn. Like, I don't know, I like a little bit thicker yarn. This one hits the mark. This one's a little lighter than that one. So I don't know, that's my review of all the bamboo content yarns I have, and I have more yarns to show. This just happened to be all the ones that contained bamboo, so it's kind of like comparing apples to apples, more or less. Maybe like comparing different berries to each other, because there's quite a bit of difference between a 50-50 cotton bamboo and 100% bamboo rayon, But these are my picks for the top of that bunch of yarn. It's still not very narrowed down. I still haven't found my perfect yarn either, though. Also, here's a little bit more organized look at my favorites. So I kind of kicked out this one since it's basically the same as that, but I would consider those interchangeable. And you can see the size of the test squares for each. All of these squares are unblocked, by the way. They would look better if I had blocked them, but I also kind of wanted it to be an honest, like, here's what it looks like right off the hook. So you can see that's the one downfall I feel like of bamboo. It does add this softness, the sheen, the drapiness, but it also is unforgiving, non-stretchy, and kind of gives you that not perfect look, which I'm sure blocking would help a lot, but just so you know, it's going to have sort of that, all your uneven tension is going to show with this type of yarn. But I still like it. I don't know, I'll use it again. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you sitting through all of this. If you're still here, give the video a like, maybe subscribe if you're not subscribed, share with someone if you think they would like to know a little bit more about which bamboo yarns I liked. And of course, everyone's different, so you might have the complete opposite opinion of me on all of these. And that's okay. Everybody has what they like and they don't. So, all right, thanks again. I appreciate you. And I'll see you next time. Happy crafting.